When we talk about McDonald's combo meals, we talk about savory meat, golden fries, and your favorite drink. Now, the combo meals just got crispy, juicy, and tender with the new Crispy Chicken Sandwich Combo. And you have to try it.
Get a classic or spicy crispy chicken sandwich with medium fries and a medium soft drink like Sprite for only $6. Promotion pricing may be lower than meal pricing. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Almo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Welcome to Almo's World Podcast. This is Elmo and we're here with my friend Scott. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, how you doing? Nice to be here. Yeah, my name is Scott Williamson. I'm originally out of Orange County, California, and yeah, I'm basically an agnostic atheist when it comes to the Abrahamic gods and most supernatural gods. But I also describe myself as a scientific pantheist or a naturalistic pantheist, and I do this because it's a good way to talk to theists about what I believe and how to explain some really popular questions that theists would ask me. So it seems like this label seems to make more sense, or seems to describe what I believe better, although many people can be different when they call themselves a pantheist. So yeah, we'll get into it and you'll kind of see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, but in terms of like, let's say, what is life to you right now? What are you working on? Where are you at?
Oh yeah. So I write music. I also am an IT contractor, so I work with hospitals and different agencies, government agencies in the IT field. But my passion is the music, so I write electronic music for different record labels and people. I work with some very interesting Grammy Award-winning songwriters, as a matter of fact. So I've been kind of lucky in that regard to be able to have worked with a person named Mike Greenlee and Audrey Martels, who wrote some Grammy Award-winning songs in the past. So I've been really lucky in that endeavor, so we're kind of exploring that musically. But yeah, for the most part, I'm a DJ, electronic producer, DJ on various internet radio stations, promoting that and promoting my own music and other electronic music artists. So if you're an electronic music artist out there and you want your song promoted, hit me up, let me know. Just email me at dubshinemusic@gmail.com. You can catch me there on my Facebook. But yeah, that's what I've got cooking these days, my man.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so right now, dude, like, if I ask you, hey man, Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, what would you say?
Well, if you told me that, I mean, just like any other claim, I would have to ask, just be as clear as you can about what you mean by a savior, because everybody's idea of Jesus is a little bit different. Some are Trinitarian, some are not. And then ask you, how can we test that? How can we both go in and test that theory out? How do you know that to be the case, and how can we test it? Yeah, that would be the way that I would approach that claim.
Okay, if we're gonna test it out, right? Like, let's say that I believe in a Trinitarian God, and I say, oh man, because it's the Bible says so. You know, it's clearly depicted in the New Testament. You know, and even in parts of the Old Testament, God is a Trinity. What would you say? What would you say? Like,
then I would ask, why should we believe the Bible? Like, what is it about the Bible that should be compelling, or someone like myself should find compelling?
yeah, well, I guess, like, you know, if I were to sort of go even further, you know, or backwards, I would say, well, it's because, like, if we observe the universe, and we can clearly see that it is created, you know, and there is a creator out there, and if there is this God, you know, he must be omnibenevolent, omnipresent, super powerful, you know, and if and personal too, and at one point he would have made contact with the human race, and the Bible would have been that clear, I guess, like, depiction of what had happened in history.
Okay, so it seems like and just to kind of repeat back, just for clarity. So basically what you're saying is that when you look at the universe, you see it as definitely being a created thing, right? And that this creator is a who, it's a person, it's personal, it must be conscious, it's all powerful, it's all knowing, and it's all present everywhere. So it's sort of transcendent from the universe in the sense that this God created everything. Is that pretty much where you're starting from?
Yeah. I mean, basically, you know, the classical theist arguments for God. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So before we get into the Bible, because, you know, a lot of Abrahamic religions, like Orthodox Jews or Muslims, would argue the same way for their God and their holy book, right? So before we would get into the specific books that you find compelling, like the New Testament, Old Testament, then we can just kind of focus in on the first piece of that, which is kind of the premise to the Bible being true. Is that correct? Like, first we'd have to establish that there must be a God, and then we can start looking at which holy books would reveal that
exactly.
God. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So when you look at the universe, what is it about the universe that makes you believe it must be created by a personal, all-powerful, all-knowing God?
Well, if you were to ask me that question, I would say, well, it's the intelligibility in how how the universe works. You know, if the universe were to have been changed by a little in terms of its physics, right, by even just the smallest decimal, then everything would be utter chaos, you know. And the thing is, right, like, we see there is causality, everything makes sense, this universe is logical, and it's just intelligible, you know. And the fact that we ourselves have consciousness, and that we are actual beings or things that are able to actually have this cognitive abilities, you know. And it seems to me that the universe sort of already had the blueprint for our consciousness, and I would say that it is obvious, it is clear that there is such a thing as this necessary being that created everything, you know. Especially when we argue for, like, the contingency argument with the kalam and other arguments too, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, even most physicists, I think the consensus of physicists who study cosmology and origins would agree that, the universe, there was a point when the universe expanded, a beginning of an expansion. So there's an observable universe we see, and it goes by definite laws. It seems to be fine-tuned, is what in physics they call it fine-tuning. And so for the universe to exist the way we observe it, it has to meet certain criteria, work a certain way. We understand causality. And so God seems to be a pretty intuitive explanation to explain these things. I mean, after all, we ourselves create things of very complex order. How much more so is the universe that much more complex, right? So it seems intuitive that it would be something superhuman or something like us, but on a much, much grander scale, to have created such complexity and things of that nature. However, this is the thing. The God concept is one concept that's out there, a supernatural God. But, the alternative to that explanation would be something natural, something that can do the same thing a God can do, but just described as a natural thing instead of a supernatural thing, right? So scientists, physicists, they look for a natural explanation for things that we don't understand. Every single mystery about the universe so far that's ever been solved has been explained with a natural solution. So when it comes to the origins, it seems that because we don't have an answer, it's very, very tempting to introduce a whole other category of things we call like a supernatural God or something like that. Something conscious, something volitional, something personal. I don't know if that's really necessary as an explanation. We don't know that. We're just sort of inferring that. And so if we look at the alternative, we can say that maybe some primitive particle, primitive particle caused everything to come into existence, that we see. So in other words, what most theists are talking about is that the universe, the observable universe, started to exist. But you're not saying, are you saying that reality itself started to exist? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean just the observable universe?
Well, I would say like everything that is, that exists. So like if you're going to say that, this natural thing is the cause, then I would say that natural thing that is the cause that you claim is actually part of everything and should also have come out of nothing, right? So it's either everything came out from nothing or everything came out from God. So which is it? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that kind of goes to my point. Did God always exist, or did God come from nothing?
Well, I guess like we would define God as eternal,
Eternal, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, that's what I'm saying. There's a fallacy out there called special pleading. It's when we take one concept over another. This thing here is a special category. Like we can say, well, some natural thing can't always exist, but God can, because God's special. So that's actually a logical fallacy called special pleading.
Yeah, I do agree, right? But I guess like there's also another angle to this, maybe. Like for example, it's either the universe was started simply came from like infinite regress, like dominoes, or that there is in terms of logic, there is this necessary being that had to be the cause for everything. And I guess like logically we could arrive at God, at this necessary thing that has always existed.
So, okay. Would you say, how would you say God gets out of that special pleading problem? Infinite regress, I think you brought up. How would God escape the infinite regress problem?
Well, because like infinite regress is sort of like like causality thing, right? So it's like an event caused by this, by this, by this, by this. But when we look at God, the concept of God itself, it is at an end point. You know, it is independent. It is a thing of being that would be necessary and would be actually, it would actually make sense to create such an infinite universe.
Right. Exactly. So it sounds like you're saying that God can escape this infinite regress because it's an endpoint. It's the beginning. It's the thing that always existed, that doesn't need a cause for itself, but yet causes everything. So what I'm saying is that there's no reason to also assume that there's some unknown natural property that can be described the exact same way. It's just unknown for right now, or it's poorly understood. But that concept can equally exist aside God. In other words, we can replace the word God with a natural thing. And in fact, that goes to my naturalistic pantheism. So I agree with you. There's some all-powerful, non-contingent, ultimate origin, which is the metaphysical primary thing from which everything we observe that exists emerges from, right? And this thing you call God, and that's fine. And I can call it God too. In fact, I call it pantheism.
Let's talk about naturalistic pantheism. So, can you break it down for the audience?
Yes. So basically, it's every aspect that's described as God, the necessary thing for the universe to exist, for consciousness to exist, for fine-tuning to exist, for all the mysteries of the universe and those things we already know. There's a natural property. Not all of it is known necessarily, because we're not omniscient. None of us are deities. None of us are gods. But we can infer that there's some metaphysical primary thing that exists from which everything comes from. I call this thing God, but I don't give it unnecessary properties. Like, I don't necessarily say it's volitional or personal or conscious in the same way. The reason why is because, for one thing, I don't know this to be true. That's the number one thing. I'm ignorant of that. This is just an inference, and I can only infer what's necessary. The other thing, too, is when you start proposing that this God or this thing that created everything, including consciousness, goodness, morality, but you also have to understand that evil exists as well. There's evil in the world. There's suffering in the world. Well, if this thing is personal, then this thing is also responsible for the suffering and the evil that exists in the world. So therefore, when I say that this God is non-personal, then we don't have to blame this thing or worry about this thing as being evil or good. It's sort of apersonal. It's amoral, evil. It's just something that exists that everything comes from. In fact, it may be a very simple property. It may just be some asymmetrical property from which everything emerges from. In fact, the game of life kind of proves, if you're familiar with that, like a simulation called the game of life, where very simple binary properties naturally sort of emerge into communities of life, of things we would call life, that reproduce and interact with communities and wider cultures, and they just naturally emerge. We've seen this through the mathematics and through the simulation called game of life. And so many scientists, hypothesize that it's the same way. The universe is sort of the same way. We see metaphysical emergence in everything in the universe. We see that consciousness may be a metaphysically emergent property of the natural world. The same with order. When you look at chaos theory, chaos theory works in the same logic, that all of these chaotic and random information, what they call information in the universe, at some point can cluster and become very organized. And this sort of self promotes itself, so that organization comes out of that chaos. And so I kind of see that all of this stuff could just as easily be explained that way. We've got a little bit of evidence to go on. We kind of see it, that there's natural reasons that can explain a lot of things. And before, natural inference tells you that if a natural explanation is the solution to every single problem that has ever come up, then why would we then expect some new category of things to start explaining things? It's just not logical. And so that's the reason I'm a naturalistic pantheist. So hopefully that's not too confusing. I tried to be really straightforward, but that's what it is. Basically.
I got the gist of it. Okay, so one thing that I really noticed was that I think it's the problem of evil that really push you towards instead of like a personal God, towards a natural pantheist God, right? Because like, how could this personal loving God, omnibenevolent God, allow evil and suffering into the world, right?
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a big emotional driver.
Yeah. I wanna go back to the other arguments for a natural pantheist God, because I want to talk to about those topics too. But let's get down to the POE for a moment, right? The problem of evil. Yeah. Okay, so if you were coming from, let's say, philosophically, right? If you were to argue that, let's say I'm making an argument that there's so much evil in this world, and either this God is also evil, or that there's no God at all, or that the God is immoral, or doesn't care about good or evil. It's just impersonal, right? But when you claim the fact that there is an actual standard of good and evil, when you claim that this standard is an objective standard of good and evil, then you're actually claiming some sort of transcendent criteria in the universe that you're judging God himself. So it's either that so it's a logical problem of argument for the problem of evil I'm talking about, right? Like, it's either that you're sourcing your argument against God from him himself, from God himself, God, the one that sets the objective standard for good and evil, or you're simply basing it from your subjective basis. And if it's coming from your subjective basis, then it's not really an argument at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do understand what you mean. So just to be clear, the problem of evil is basically an old philosophical problem. So if I can remember this correctly, so premise one, if an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, or omniscient God exists, then evil does not exist. But there is evil in the world. And so the conclusion is, therefore, an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient God does not exist. So that's how the I think it was the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy describes the problem of evil. Now, associated with that is also the argument from free will, right? So that one goes a little bit like this. It basically says an argument from free will would propose that omniscience and free will are incompatible, and that as a result, either God does not exist, or any concept of God that contains both of these elements is incorrect. So an omniscient God has knowledge of the future, and so whatever choices the God is going to make, he's going to know what it is, because God's knowledge of the future is perfect. So he cannot make a different choice, and therefore he has no free will by definition. Alternatively, a God with free will can make different choices based on knowledge of the future, but then God's knowledge of the future would be imperfect or limited. So otherwise, he wouldn't need to change his mind in the first place, right? But if he has foreknowledge, he would know that he was going to change his mind anyways, and therefore there's no free will involved in that. And that links back to the evil problem, because he also knows that evil and sin and all the things that a theist would bring up that exists in the world or acknowledge in the world does exist. And so if this God that you're defining as omniscient and all-powerful, well, he knew ahead of time that sin was going to exist. Therefore, he can't be all-loving. If he was, he's also all-powerful, so he could stop the sin somehow. If he's all-powerful, he would know how to do that. He could do that. So you run into there's certain contradictions and problems. This isn't necessarily assuming that the God exists and then blaming the God for anything. It's basically an old philosophical problem. It's the argument from evil and argument from free will. Both of those things are linked together, and it seems like theism has not yet come to a conclusion to fix that problem.
I would say there are many already conceived theodicies to I guess not really completely explain, but sort of attempt to have an answer to why there is evil and why God would allow evil and suffering into the world, right? Sure. And I guess like we're not here to discuss the delicate intricacies here, but of the problem of evil. But okay, like I do agree that the problem of evil is really problematic for those theists who do, claim that God is a personal, omnibenevolent, loving God. You're right, yeah. But okay, let's talk about the consciousness, though. Yeah. You sort of mentioned that our consciousness here in the universe is sort of like a metaphysically emergent phenomenon, right? How can you go deeper into that, and how that links to consciousness, therefore a pantheist God?
Yes. So consciousness exists in the world. We know that, or we have good reason to believe that. I mean, we could say that solipsism is true, but solipsism is after all unproven. I could be the only mind that's existing and you're just a figment of my imagination. But it doesn't really get you anywhere. So I don't really accept solipsism, right? So I'll just go ahead and say that, okay, number one, I exist. I'm experiencing an existence. I'm experiencing a reality. From that, we can infer anything. We infer everything from that. And so that's the basic of the epistemology, is that I think, therefore I am. After that, we can look at any subject you want. You want to talk about consciousness? Well, what do we know about consciousness? Consciousness is a hard problem. So while we intimately know that we're conscious, I can't even prove that you're conscious or anybody else is conscious, much less that a God is conscious, right? Or much less that the universe is conscious, right? I only really know that I'm conscious. But if I just have it as a given that you're conscious and other things are conscious, then I can ask the question, why is that? What are the commonalities? And it seems like the way that we measure consciousness is going to be from behaviors, intelligent behaviors. So we know that creatures like us with brains we behave intelligently. We create things, we do things, we seem to have concepts of space and time. But then again, so does simple slime mold that doesn't even have a brain, much less a nervous system. A simple piece of slime mold can actually figure out problems, remember things, make plans, do irrational things. So simple things like that, or an amoeba or anything like that, are in effect seem to be conscious. If we're going to infer that certain behavior and intelligence is a sign of consciousness, then we would have to also say that slime mold and other simple creatures are conscious. So where do we draw the line? Because even people that are in a coma that can't behave or can't talk or can't do anything, they're also conscious. We come to find out that they have, when they come out of comas, they remember things. So there's no real solid way to know where to draw the line, right? And so in that case, consciousness seems to be pervasive in the natural world. For some reason, we don't know. We don't understand how and why that's the case, but it is. But it seems like wherever we do see consciousness, it's going to be in matter. It's going to be in some form of embodiment, like a slime mold or an amoeba or a brain or something like that. We're going to see those kind of intelligent behaviors. That's the only way that we know something is conscious. So for me to say, to infer that there's this consciousness out there that's not embodied, that lives outside space and time, that I don't know those things. I can't really talk about those things. Honestly, I couldn't sit there and say that makes any kind of sense, because everything we observe is embodied consciousness. And so for that case, I would say that consciousness emerges just like matter emerges from energy. So, and we know that consciousness embodies matter, and matter that, behaves a certain way. And so in that case, I would say that the best I can do is say that consciousness is an emergent property. It emerges from matter somehow. How it does that, I don't know, but I couldn't infer non-embodiment for consciousness. I just couldn't, not genuinely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, like the nature of this pantheist thing that you believe in, do you have sort of a description, maybe? Like, how do you define it specifically? Like, what is its ontology?
Yeah, so I would probably ground it in just energy. And, and I know that energy
like something like the Higgs boson. That was what you were talking about?
Something similar to that. Energy is eternal. You can't create it, can't destroy it. Everything emerges from energy because energy changes forms. And it seems that the Big Bang emerged from something we call for now the singularity, which is a point of energy. Some people call it a probability distribution that, in what we call quote unquote nothing is actually a lot of stuff going on. Maybe not matter, maybe not material stuff, but it is probability distribution. It's quantum. It's, I think they call it quantum foam or quantum fluctuations, where virtual particles seem to pop into existence seemingly from nothing. Well, it doesn't come from absolute philosophical nothing. That would be kind of a definitional problem right there. So it comes from a state of energy, a very poorly understood state of energy, of probability. And that's where I think that I ground my pantheism in reality, is in that sort of energy. And, this energy isn't necessarily conscious. It's not necessarily personal. It's just, it is what it is. And in fact, it's very poorly understood. It's an unknown property.
Mm-hmm. From how I look at it, right? How you define something like a pantheist universe? I guess it by definition, like, it does carry the attributes that God would have, like the personal God would have, like being this necessary being, like the cause of everything, sort of the reason why everything is like sort of intelligible, as you would also propose. But I think it's more of simply that you're arguing for a dualistic universe. You're saying that, okay, I believe that there is this physical time and space universe, right? But there's also something sort of metaphysical about it, by which like the consciousness is sort of part of a unit, sort of another threshold that consciousness is part of, and this sort of energy is, I guess, also part of this other sort of threshold. But it's still, I guess, like part of the thing, right? The monad of, the everything that exists. So it's not a spiritual realm. I'm not talking about that, but it's simply like something other than the normal natural definition of physical reality that we define. Right? Is that what you're talking about?
It kind of is. But as far as duality, I really kind of don't see it that way deeply, because I think that we are a part of the universe intimately. The fact that we're conscious of the universe. In other words, you couldn't be conscious unless you had something to be conscious of. And then you can't have something you could be conscious of if you weren't conscious of it. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. And I think that the duality part, the fact that we see, cause and effect, we see up and down, we see black and white, we see all these opposites that we define the world as. I think that just gives meaning to life. It makes life more meaningful. But all of this stuff happens within consciousness itself, which, like I said, we can infer consciousness is also intimately part of the same thing that we're observing. So there's this subject-object split. It's kind of an illusion in a way. But I guess like how would you I guess like how you could fit it into a sort of duality? It's simply that there is a distinction by which what the object is and what the subject is, right? Yeah. At one level, you're right. At one level, you definitely couldn't do science without it. So, and you couldn't really do anything meaningful without that distinction. That's true. But that's just one way of speaking about the world. Any quantum physicist will tell you that causality breaks down at a certain realm of reality, at a certain level of reality. There's non-causality. It's called quantum non-causality. There's quantum non-locality, where things aren't really in one position or one place. Time doesn't flow in the way that we understand time to flow. There's realms of reality where what we understand to be just common sense intuition just doesn't make sense to speak about it in that way. That's why we have a whole field called quantum logic, where classical logic just doesn't make sense. When we talk about things, everything must have a cause. How can there be an effect without a cause? That all makes sense intuitively to us because we live in this very Newtonian world, this very classically mechanical world. But there's other realms of this same reality that don't operate like that. And we know this for 100% of a fact, that that's just the way it is. And when we start talking about origins of the universe, well, we're talking about that realm. We're talking about where time breaks down, where there is no space, where there is no causality as we understand it. And so these things are a mystery to us, but they're all part of the same reality. It's just that our observation is what dictates to us. And it's very easy to kind of conflate what we observe and what we understand to be the truth. This is why I'm sort of, like I said, an agnostic atheist, but I'm really agnostic about a lot of things. I'm agnostic about especially ontological claims. I'm very agnostic about it, not because I want to be, but because I have no choice. I have to admit that I don't know everything, and that I'm a human being, and I operate in a very level of the world that's Newtonian and very mechanical. And but we also know that there's these other realms of reality that we don't experience. Hardly anybody, and it's even hard to speak about with people that aren't familiar with these concepts. And so these things kind of inform my agnosticism about the world.
Okay, I guess I sort of have an understanding of what your natural pantheism is, right? So let's talk about I guess the something like teleology. What is, for you, like, where, I guess, evolutionarily, naturalistic creatures, right? And and our consciousness is simply just emergent from the universe itself. It's not really designed by some personal god or intended or anything. So what is life, and why do we, what is our pursuit here? Like, what is the purpose? Even if it's just subjective, how would you look at it?
Yeah, so it seems that all creatures emerge from that we know of emerge from the earth. If we look at the earth, there was a time when human beings weren't here. There was a time when the earth was filled with other kind of animals, and still is. And when we look into nature, when we look at animals, it seems that most creatures that ever existed, go extinct. They die. They live for a time, they die. It seems that, they either are able to adapt to their environments or they're not. If they cannot, then they die off, unfortunately. And fortunate for us, we have, a very strong ability to manipulate our reality. So we can fight diseases like COVID-19, for example, and other plagues throughout history. We can create technology that allows us to travel to, escape dangers, to make life comfortable, a lot of things. And we've seen this increase over time. So it seems that the purpose for human beings is really just to survive like anything else on one level, but it's also to kind of learn more about our environment so that we can better control it, so that we can better propagate. It seems that, we want to pass on our genes. We want to pass on information. That's why we're having this discussion right now. There's a drive within humans to communicate with one another and learn from one another and teach one another and express ourselves. That's why we have things like music and like philosophy, and we write books and we tell stories. We're narrators, we're big storytellers. And so it seems that for human beings, the more deep on survival and procreation would be to pass on information. And it seems that we also want to live a long time. We want to keep on living so we can keep passing on our information. And I think that's part of what drives us to believe in immortality and things of that nature. It's a very strong motivation, and it's a very powerful concept, this thing of immortality, living on forever. Why do we have this drive within us? It's because I think we want to pass on information in various forms, not just genetically, but we want to pass on information verbally and intellectually, And, when some people say, my purpose in life, I want to make sure that I leave my mark, so to speak. Everybody wants to leave their mark in the world before they die. It's like a form of immortality. And I think it's just some innate drive within us to pass on information. I think that's what it is for us.
Mm-hmm. This innate drive to pass on information, if it is like evolutionarily attained, right? It could also be anything else. It's we are simply creators of our own destiny, I guess. We are sort of conscious, right? And we're able to reason, to determine for ourselves what we value, what we hold, and if it is like, if it is sort of like kind of survival of the fittest, then that's basically it, right? That's what life is, for humanity to survive and be fit and to grow and propagate and thrive in this world that we have, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, that's a very primitive
But I guess
basic drive.
but I guess it is sort of that. Yeah, that's the foundation of everything. If we simply look at it from at face value of what it is,
Yeah, if we don't care about living and we don't care about reproducing, then the human population would go down pretty quick, and we wouldn't be around to talk about it. So that's obviously a very important driver. I would agree.
Yeah, and I sort of appreciate like the existentialist philosophers, because like if there is sort of no objective meaning to life, that there's no God, personal God that set a standard to how we should live or what are that, then like how should we humans look at life? How do we look at our own destiny? How do we look at what we should value, right? And there are things that like absurdism or the Camus, like existentialism, and even Nietzsche, he and I guess like for me, if there was no God, right, and if life was intrinsically meaningless, I would simply do what I would normally do in life. My biology tells me to be this way. And I evolved culturally to be this person that I am, and I would continue to be this person because I have no choice otherwise, right? How would you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of simple on one level, and it can be very difficult to understand on another level, because we have this thing called self-awareness as human beings. So we're aware of ourselves, we're aware of others. We have this driver within us to be empathetic. So we're kind of sort of cursed with this conscience. So we have a conscience, we feel bad when we hurt others or we make mistakes in life. But this is a good thing. This is what keeps us from killing each other off. This is what helps us to survive. Nature has a way of giving us those drivers that are so inherent within us that we just take it for granted that we're choosing these things out of the goodness of our hearts to be. And that's not necessarily true. What I've come to learn after looking at a lot of research about psychology and about nature and things over the years, I've come to realize that, we humans, we're just like any other animal. We have instincts. We have things that we're not conscious of, and we act on them. And it's only after the fact that we start making sense of them. Like I said before, we're storytellers. So when I'm very friendly to my neighbors, I can tell myself after the fact of behaving nice towards my neighbors, oh, I did a good thing. I chose to do this because of reasons, and come up with all kinds of reasons. The fact of the matter is, I wouldn't have done it unless there was some sort of emotional driver to begin with. There has to be something in your subconscious or unconscious that's already at work and pushing you to do these things. And so when you start asking the question, well, if it wasn't for my beliefs in God or my beliefs in some sort of objective standard by which to behave, I think I would just go and do whatever it is I want to do. Well, you're kind of doing what you want to do anyways, as it is. You can't not do what you don't want to do. That's the only limitation with free will. I can go ahead and grant we have free will just for the sake of easy to talk about it. But one thing we don't have will over is to do what we want to do. You always have to do what you want to do. Even if you say, I want to eat this chocolate cake, but I'm not going to do it. If you don't eat the chocolate cake, it's because still you didn't want to do it. There was some other reason that kind of pushed you not to do it. And so when we think about, all these drivers, like I was talking about before, to be nice to your neighbor, things like that, you do these things because you want to do them to begin with. You can say later on that it was because of my pantheism, or you can say later on it was because of my belief in Christianity or Islam or my Hindu beliefs. Those are just stories to explain why it makes sense of what you've already done. I think that we do things because we want to do them, and we can't do otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess like talking about free will, I myself believe in actually believe in libertarian free will, but maybe we could talk about that next time, man. But we are closing at an hour now, and we have 10 minutes left. But I wanna ask you one last thing, Scott, because it's been a great conversation with you. So when it comes to, I guess, like in intellectual integrity, I myself am agnostic at many levels too, right? And it's simply that, if you look at it rationally, what is the logical conclusion, right? And in terms of like I guess confidence in the answer, then you have to look at all the other possibilities, and if the proposed answer or the one that people claim is simply has not much probability, then I wouldn't believe it too, right? So how would you, I guess, like define your own intellectual integrity in terms of your standard for your beliefs, right? For your worldview, for what you hold? Would you say that that everything that you believe is, I guess, like stands by this principle that I just won't believe a claim as long as it's not demonstrable for me, or I can't really prove it 100% to be true? Like, how would you define your worldview?
Yeah, very good question. I would just say that if I can't really argue for something, then it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for me to call it my belief. If I was to say I believe in Santa Claus, but I can't really explain how I came to that belief, neither to anyone else or to myself, then do I honestly really believe that thing, or am I just going around saying I believe that thing? Maybe it makes me feel better. So I guess the decision that I have to make is to kind of balance out, am I saying I believe things because they just make me feel good, or am I believing things because they honestly resonate with me logically as well? I think the best sort of beliefs are the things that can do both. And so that's why I'm a pantheist. An atheist, a lot of atheists kind of get on me about that too. Like, I get challenged a lot by atheists. They're like, well, you're just redefining the universe as God or whatever. Like, how is that really logical? That's circular reasoning, and to an extent it is. But what I say is that I'm actually appealing to naturalism. I'm just labeling it God as a way to feel good about the universe. So if you do a job, if I go to my job and I don't feel good at my job, I don't last very well in my job. I won't last very long in that job. I have to feel good about what I'm doing. I have to have some sort of positive outlook about my job and whatever it is I'm doing. And so the same with life. You ask, what is it about life? What is it about your beliefs? They have to make me feel good. I mean, that's honestly the truth. And hopefully the things I feel good about can also line up with logic and line up with evidence as well. But what I'm not going to do is just believe things because they feel good, even when they're not. I can't explain them logically. If there's some sort of contradiction, either with reality or just internal within the belief system itself, I'm going to reject it, because I do have that agency. I can reject beliefs. I can do things and choose not to believe things that don't make me feel good. That's what I want to do. And I can't help but to do what I want. So that's kind of what drives my beliefs, since you asked that. It's a good question, and it's not so easy to explain sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just to be clear, right? Like, so if you're saying that, you hold these beliefs, so just sort of to, I guess, to be able to accept reality and live your life the way you want it, right? So basically, like, how should a person live this life from your perspective, knowing that there's no personal God and it's simply this natural pantheist God out there? Like, why would I do good? Why should I pursue my own happiness? Why shouldn't I just end my own life? Because there's probably no afterlife anyway. In your worldview, like, how should I live my life?
You live your life in a way that makes you feel good, makes you happy. When it doesn't work for you, then it's time to live your life differently. If being a criminal makes you happy and you decide to be a criminal, you're going to do that anyways. But then you're going to go to jail, you're going to get killed. And then that's not going to make you too happy. And so you're going to have to change. And we have systems in place like law, consequences. We have things that guide us into living a life that can meld well with the outside society. Thing is, we share space with everybody. And so when we talk about oughts and shoulds, we're really talking about sharing space with others in a way that's good for everybody. So now we're kind of talking into political things. But if you talk about personal things, I would say, just for me, take in as much information as you can, learn as much as you can. Why should you do that? Because it has to come within. I can't tell someone what they should or shouldn't do. So it's kind of, again, I would say it's very subjective. It's a very subjective thing. What's good for everybody is subjective to them. Like, for some people playing basketball, for me it's music. For somebody else it's something else. You have to find out what works for you. As far as doing good to others, well, most normal people want already to do good to others. They want to live peacefully. And to live peacefully, you have to foster a society which is tolerant and fosters peace with everybody. But then you have psychopaths, people that don't have that inner compass or that inner guidance. What do you do for them? What should they do? You can't tell them what they ought to do. They have no reason to do it. They're psychopaths, right? They're sick, or their brain is not wired up correct. Well, we have, hopefully medical advances that can help them with that. We have different things in our society as we grow and evolve as a society to kind of help evolve the world towards a better world. So while I can't really give you a solid grounding like God for why you do things, I can say it's been demonstrated that even people who don't believe in God do good things for others. And the reason why is because we have within us an internal empathetic inclination. And that's a normative thing with human beings. And so luckily that's what's helped us survive all this long.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott, it's been awesome talking to you, man. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, bro. Yeah. You're awesome conversation. Yeah. Bye, bro.
All right, bud. Have a good one.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
Gearheads know that some projects need so many parts, it feels like you need a whole storage unit just to store them. That's what eBay Motors' 122 million parts are for. Think of it as your virtual parts garage. They've always got the right fitment at the right prices. Use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.